Business is booming. But you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think spreadsheets were just part of it. Ugh. But real-time cash flow? Wow. Invoices that chase themselves? Even better. Books that automate? That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No spreadsheet in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search Xero for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Hi friends, Grace from the Working Hard podcast here. When you're stretching every dollar, a little goes a long way, and Walmart Business is here to help. They make it easy to order what you need, from tech and cleaning supplies to everyday essentials, all at low prices and with helpful tools like spend tracking and tax-exempt purchasing for eligible organizations. Because when your operations are smooth, your impact can be bigger. Visit business.walmart.com to get started.
If your eyes are the windows to your soul and your glasses are the windows to your eyes, then it's pretty important to find your perfect frames. That's why at Warby Parker, we've made shopping for eyewear as easy and fun as can be. Peruse endless styles in our stores, or use our app to virtually try on frames and get personalized recommendations. To find your next favorite pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to locate your nearest Warby Parker store, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals that we've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Alan McConnell. Alan is a former Australian rules football player and now coach. In 1996, he was appointed as the coach of the Fitzroy Football Club in the Australian Football League for the final 8 games in their 113-year history, before they were to be taken over by a team who were then known as the Brisbane Bears. After Fitzroy, he joined Geelong under Mark Thompson and was then appointed head coach at the Australian Institute of Sport, leading Australia's best male youth. From there, he moved to the newly formed GWS Giants as the Director of Football. Then in 2017, he was appointed as the senior coach of the Giants AFL Women's side, becoming the first person to coach both the men's and a women's side at the highest level. At present, he is a member of the Australian Institute of Sport's High Performance Coach Development Team, where he mentors and supports some of the nation's best emerging and elite high performance coaches. And finally, in 2022, he was awarded the Neil Danaher Lifetime Achievement Award. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. The program bridges the gap between theory and real-world application, bringing together world-leading professors, executives, and industry partners to teach you how business can be used for good. I have just started working with the team at Macquarie on some projects and can attest to the quality of the people and material. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our interview with Alan McConnell.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Alan McConnell, hello, good morning.
Paul, good to see you.
Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Cheers.
We've been talking about this for quite a while, so I'm glad that I could actually get a date with you where we can go through your long and storied and winding career.
Well, I think you've been talking about it for a while, Paul. That's true. I've been listening.
I've managed to pin you down. I am good that way when I find a coach who I think's got an interesting story to tell, and you've definitely got an interesting story to tell. So we're going to start from way back in the country, back in Terang, and we're going to go all the way through to the grand final with GWS Giants and beyond. But could I start with just talking about two of the big names that you've worked with? There's Kevin Sheedy and Mark Thompson. Now, people listening may not know a lot about Australian rules football, but both of those gentlemen are some of the most successful coaches of all time. In your work now, as a coach developer across all sports, you're also getting to see some pretty good ones up close. And I'm just wondering what you've noticed about the great coaches and how they do things perhaps differently from the rest.
I think every coach I've worked with has a strength or strengths. There's no such thing as the perfect coach. We all aspire to be that, but I don't think I've met one yet. The couple of names you mentioned, it's interesting they actually worked with one another. Mark was Sheed's premiership captain, I think, from memory.
He was, yeah.
And Sheeds was obviously very innovative, creative, crazy, thought outside the square, but very loyal. You wanted to be on his team. You didn't want to be on somebody who... Yeah, you can... I remember watching him play, and you'd want to be on his team, not the other team. And Bomber, unbelievable capacity to teach the game, and I think a really underrated quality in coaching is patience, belief and patience, which means you need to give things time, and in high performance sport people often don't want to give you time. So truth is I was moved on by the time Bomber had all of his success at Geelong, but it nearly blew up before they had their moment in the sun. So so I guess like everything, patience, there are times I'm thinking, come on mate, get on with it, but it proved, his patience proved to be one of his great assets in my mind, because he had belief and he was prepared to give people time to flourish.
So those are the great ones, but let's go back to the start of the journey. Let's go back to Terang, little country town.
Actually, Kalora before Terang.
Kalora before Terang.
Yes, and a minor league, which is where my family all played. My father, my grandfather, his father, and my brother are all life members of the local footy club.
And you were playing in the seniors at about 15, I think.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So what was the impetus to head down to Melbourne and take your life in a different direction?
Study. I'd left, finished year 12, wanted to, came to Melbourne to study physical education, and my brother had actually been invited to come down and train, playing a practice match for Fitzroy, and I took my bag along and asked for a game. And
as you do.
And I survived, and he got the flick. So that was interesting. Yeah.
So 3 years then in the VFL, 30 odd games, I think.
Well, that was at Fitzroy. I won a best and fairest with Fitzroy's under-19s. Got meningitis and then got the flick, and then went to Footscray, so I went to played in the VFA for a couple of years, and then back to Footscray, where the under-19s, Fitzroy under-19s coach had transferred to Footscray, and in fact he's the one who got me across to Footscray, which is where I played the VFL games. Yeah.
But you went straight from that experience into coaching. Was there someone, or was there something that ignited this passion in you to go off and coach?
I think that under-19s coach was certainly a great mentor. I was a pretty young, naive country kid when I arrived in Melbourne, and he certainly was very influential in my life. Played a significant role, in nurturing my growth as a young man, and I'm still keeping close contact with him today. So he's probably the one the way he did it was the way I would like to be perceived, I guess. I guess that was the influence that he gave me, and met a lot of lifelong friends at that time too.
Well, you said the way he did it was the way you'd like to be perceived. It might be a little early in the interview, but perhaps I'll ask you, how is it that you want to be perceived?
Genuine, honest, authentic, real, challenging, supportive, somebody who wants to make a difference but who cares.
We're going to talk a little bit about care as we go through the interview because it comes up a little bit in your story. But I'd like to hold it over for now if I could, because there's a few steps I think that we need to go through to sort of frame how care has come to be central to your approach to not only coaching, I think, but life as well.
Yeah.
So 96 comes around. You've been coaching, you've been doing well, and then there's this bloke in his 30s that's now coaching in the top league in Australia. But it's interesting, Alan, isn't it? Because you were coaching in the dying days of a club with a 113-year history. Which...
the centenary year of the competition.
Now, look, I don't want to... There was a lot of ethical issues, and you and I have talked about these issues before, and I don't necessarily want to open up all those old wounds, but I'm interested to know how dealing with the closing down of an institution, the closing down of something that meant so much to people, has gone on to shape the person or the leader that you are today.
Yeah, and I think the other bit I'd add to that is I had a pretty influential role at the end, being the head coach, but without any real authority in the context that I was the head coach had actually quit, and so I was catapulted in for the second time as the head coach in 2 years. And so, it was a slippery road in a lot of ways, very under-resourced, and some function but lots of dysfunction, and not necessarily a lot of authority or resources to be able to make a difference. And I reckon when you stand in front of a playing group or a group of athletes or in front of anybody and look to take a leadership role, you have to believe you can make a difference. And that was a real stretch.
How did you cope with that then?
Well, the reality is we weren't going to play great footy. That's the truth. We had, when I took over the second time in that final year, we had 8 games left. We'd won 1 game in 12 months. And everyone thought that the announcement of a merger would unify the group, in the context of, being able to present a united front to each individually and collectively get scouted and recruited to Brisbane. And the reality is the opposite happened. It was 7 or 8 who almost immediately came to agreement with Brisbane that they were going to Brisbane.
And so just for everybody there, the context is the team was closing down, but it was merging with the team at the far end of Australia, so it wasn't exactly close by.
So we had 7 or 8 players who knew their destiny. We had another 8 or 10 who thought there was some chance of maybe being recruited to another club. We had a bunch of older blokes who figured their careers were over, and then we had a bunch of kids who had no idea what the system held for them going forward and where that might take them on their life's journey. So, in fact, it actually really polarised the group splintered the group in a whole lot of different ways, because those that had contracts sort of wanted to put their queue in the rack, didn't want to get hurt. And so, team environments are all very much about everybody putting their shoulder to the same wheel and pushing in the same direction, but we had lots of people pushing in different directions at that point within within the playing group. And the other thing that happened was that supporters, members, board members, all had an agenda that they wanted to serve in terms of the politics that surrounded this demise of a 100-something-year-old club, and they wanted the players' voice to lend to their agenda. And so, I remembered having to tell the cheer squad, for example, to pull their head in, and if they produced banners with derogatory remarks about various entities going forward, that we would run around and we wouldn't go through them, because there was, the players in some regards were sort of pawns in the whole thing, if you like. And so I had in the end, I had a sense that I could, because I knew them pretty well, I'd been around for 5 or 6 years at this point, that I could look after them in a way that could unite them to a point, but also hold them to account for a set of standards so that we didn't look like a complete rabble.
There were ethical challenges at the time. I don't necessarily want to go into them. I know that they are something that has been talked about enough, but those challenges divided people. And I'm wondering what you've taken away from that you now use today in this role where you're helping coaches all over Australia, and you're helping them deal with stakeholders, head coaches, athletes. What stayed with you?
I think every experience we have in life is a lesson that we can learn and use somewhere down the track. Some of those lessons are good, some not so good. I guess I was proud of the outcome that was delivered for all of the people involved. I felt that everybody had their chance to flourish and shine in their own way off the back of that whole experience. And yes, is there something particularly I took out of that? Not really, other than that I felt I had a skill that to be able to find connection for people in really tough situations.
I think we talked about care earlier. I think I've known you now for, I guess, getting on for a year, and I see it every time we talk. Care is so central to your approach as a coach and a human being. Yeah, it is, but it's care in the context that if it's just care, it's wishy-washy, and I'd like to think there's a fair degree of challenge and prodding that comes with the care, because I think if growth and change doesn't happen in people if you just care. It needs to come with some other qualities as well. But having made a deposit in the care space, it does afford you the chance to challenge in others. I want to talk about one of those challenging moments, because I was there the day of the last game. I vividly remember it. And somewhere in my boxes downstairs, I'm sure I have the record, which is the small magazine that you're given at the game that day. And there's a great story. You were thrashed that day. I don't know, it was 120 points or something like that.
180, I think.
Right, sorry.
And it was actually our second last game. It was the last game in Melbourne, which was at the MCG. That's in front of 80,000 people playing Richmond.
Yeah, and there's a photo at the end. You've got your arm around someone, and the crowd wanted you to do a lap of honour, but
well, the AFL wanted us to do a lap of honour. The crowd probably, I guess, had probably been given some indication that might happen. So post-game, I met Brad Boyd in the middle of the ground. Actually, we're standing in the centre circle, and a photographer has actually taken our photo. And I was acutely aware that we were in the middle of the MCG with a lot of eyes watching us. And the conversation I knew was going to be somewhat contentious. We'd just been flogged. These are young men who actually have pride, who are, we've just been humiliated. It's incredibly embarrassing, and they just want to get off the ground. But they're in jumpers that have been running around in a competition for 113 years, a 100-year-old competition, and we need to honour the jumper. So the captain and I are debating intimately whether or not we're going around the boundary line before we leave the ground. And because I was acutely aware of where we were and who was watching, I've got my arm around him and I'm actually whispering in his ear. That photograph appeared in the 100th year annual general report for the AFL, and the caption on the bottom of the photograph refers to the intimate and caring relationship that exists between the captain and his coach. And the reality is we were having a ding-bong-dong battle, and there was a few expletives in the conversation driven by the captain, which basically centred around the fact that they were going to go straight down the race, and I was encouraging them to go via the boundary line and the Great Southern Stand to get there. So, yes, it's smoke and mirrors.
The quote that I've got here, I don't know whether it's Brad Boyd or whether it's you that's said it, but the quote is, you said to him, "The reality is it's the jumper that's doing the lap of honour. We just happen to be the poor fools that are inside them."
That's probably my line.
It made me wonder, when I read it, it made me wonder, so many coaches, Alan, I've interviewed, talk about the power of the jumper, the power of the jersey, the power of the singlet. I would have heard it 150 times. But this is an instance where you've actually lived it and experienced it and seen a crowd of people react to it.
It was far more than just that last game. I mean, the 8 games where I took over, it was the post-match celebration was actually far more like a wake, and it became more and more like a state funeral each week, and it was quite wearing. But what I think the real lesson for me is just how significant, particularly in Victoria, the AFL is ingrained in the culture and of the community and the community spirit that it drives within Victoria particularly, but across the country.
And nowadays, when you hear coaches talk about the power of the jersey, what's your reaction when you hear it?
Good question. I think I would articulate that it's not the jersey that's the power; it's the people in the jersey, and the jersey, I guess, is in some way a physical representation of the connection that exists, and maybe when that jumper has a long history, maybe it comes with some other responsibilities. Some of which I think organisations are better at embracing than others. But in the end, connection is a human quality. It can become almost physical if you like, but it's still a human quality, and it requires humans to drive that emotion. So, I think the jumper is symbolic of that in some ways.
So Fitzroy finish, they go up and they merge and they become the Brisbane Lions. What happened next for you?
Had a couple of interviews with a couple of AFL clubs and eventually went to Geelong to work as Gary Ayres' senior assistant coach.
Business is booming, but you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think spreadsheets were just part of it. Ugh. But real-time cash flow? Wow. Invoices that chase themselves? Even better. Books that automate? That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No spreadsheet in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search Xero for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Have you ever been stuck on a weight loss plateau? Trying everything and anything you can to lose that extra weight and reach peak health? We've all been there, but Noom's unlocked the secret to reaching the mountaintop. Go in micro. The Noom GLP-1 microdose program starts at $79 and is delivered to your door in 7 days. Start your microdose GLP-1 journey today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com. Noom. Micro changes, big results. Initial 3-week subscription and 4 weeks of medication from $79 plus tax and $179 per month plus tax for 12-week subscription thereafter. Final pricing depends on program selection. Noom GLP-1 RX program involves healthy diet, exercise, and support. Individual results may vary. Meds and personalization based on clinical need. Not reviewed by FDA for safety, efficacy, or quality. No affiliation with Novo Nordisk Inc., the only U.S. source of FDA-approved semaglutide. Not available in all 50 U.S. states.
Which would have been fun, given that Gary Ayres is, well, one of the greatest players, I guess, of all time, and a pretty decent coach. He never quite got his premiership, but he was very, very good.
And we went from not winning a game, or winning one game in 12 months, to I think we finished either first or second on the ladder playing finals. So it was actually a very there's lots of difference in terms of outcomes that occurred for me, yeah.
So the Geelong experience happens. You get together with Gary Ayres, but then in 2004, your career takes a great turn. You become the coach of the most elite youth in Australia at the Australian Institute of Sport. And the list of players that went through that program, it's so impressive because all of them are sort of these household names today. There's so many of them now. I'm not even going to put the list of them. There was that many. But you're also, in addition to coaching those kids, you're also the father of 3 children.
2 at that stage, but 3 eventually.
3
yes.
eventually. And
yes.
I'm wondering what you've learnt about harnessing the energy and the power of young people, because it seems to me you've had a fair amount of experience with it.
I think that given opportunity, it's innate within people, particularly young people, to flourish. And it's our responsibility to provide that opportunity.
So talk to me, unpack that opportunity for me then. What does a great opportunity look like? What does that environment?
Like opportunities, I think it's not necessarily great opportunity. It's just simply providing the vehicle for growth. You know, like the platform. So sometimes it's physical. It's physical in terms of where one lives, or the programs you provide access to, or the expertise that you provide access to. Sometimes, you know, for kids who've maybe had difficult upbringings, it's just simply providing with a sense of belief, or the opportunity to explore things in a way that where it's okay to make mistakes. So I think it's very, very different from one individual to the other as to what opportunity looks like.
So the key then with the youth, or in your experience, is almost tailoring things to them as individuals. Within the context, because I've actually coached, I only ever coached in a team environment. And so, but yeah, the reality is that we aspire for them all to be great, and we'd like them all to achieve common goals or similar goals, but the journey for each is so different. You know, for a kid who's come from an environment where maybe there's not been a lot of self-belief, maybe driven internally, maybe driven by external factors, opportunity is simply challenging those thoughts. Whereas for a kid who comes from the Kimberleys, it's probably more to do with giving them the opportunity to relocate from one side of the country to another side of the country, so that the opportunity for their athletic qualities to flourish in a structured environment that will allow them to survive in a professional team is what opportunity looks like. So yeah, it's very different from individual to individual. Some of those, I hate to use this word, kids, let's call them young people, went on to be great leaders. I mean, Joel Selwood springs to mind. Did you notice anything about leadership qualities that young people may have that need to be nurtured?
Specifically, no. I think the guys who all went on to to become captains of their AFL teams in that role, I think there was 5 or 6 of them. They all probably had those qualities to some degree or other, long before I met them. So, there's an element of leadership that I think is innate. There's an element of leadership that I think stems from a self-belief that allows you to look outside of yourself in a way that does allow you to influence others. There's nothing that really jumps out in being able to answer that question specifically.
So 2009 comes along, you've been coaching these terrific young athletes, and then you're the first employee of a new franchise, so the GW Giants.
Yep.
You're a life member of the club now,
yes.
And you've watched that club grow from having, a group of young kids playing there. They were 17, I think, when they had their first team. Now they've played off in a grand final and they're ascendant again. And I'm wondering, as you reflect on the growth of that club, what you've learnt around the building blocks that teams need to put in place in order to thrive.
I think the Giants' journey has been remarkable in the context that we'd like to think that growth is linear, and in fact, it rarely is. But if you look at the first 10 years of the Giants, from conception to playing off in a grand final, the growth was pretty linear in just about any parameter you'd like to measure. Attendances, membership, sponsorship, games won. On almost any parameter, the growth of the club was very, very linear, which is pretty unique. Now, the truth is, I think there's some great decisions that were made along the way that contributed to that, and there's also a little bit of luck. The way we put our list together in the first instance was in part driven by the fact that we were always going to struggle to attract mature, experienced players from other lists into our environment, because the perception was that you wouldn't want to come and live in Western Sydney, which is crazy. Because
totally crazy. It's very beautiful.
Indeed. It was a fabulous journey, and on the back of 10 years earlier being on a similar road but heading in the opposite direction, working with a team and a club that was going into receivership, being on a club that's starting from scratch and looking to build, was in many regards very, very similar, but just been on the same highway heading in a different direction.
Well, what about the block? What were the big things that the Giants got right? You said they made some good decisions. What were those things?
Well, look, I can really only talk from the performance side of the club, and professional sporting clubs are big organisations. It takes lots and lots of people and decisions and resources to make it work, and there's lots and lots of fabulous people that have made a contribution to our footy club. For me, I think some of the list management decisions in the early years were pure gold. The bulk of our experience was actually guys at the very, very end of their careers, all of whom we contracted for 1 or 2 years to play, but all of whom had contracts to shift from a playing career into a coaching career on our coaching staff beyond the end of their playing career. Now, they were all superstars of the game, premiership players, captains of their clubs, so really highly distinguished players. And because they all had coaching contracts as part of their arrangements when they arrived, they were deeply ensconced in the long-term future of the footy club, not the drive of a player at 27 or 28 years of age who's actually playing for his next career, or to fulfil the ambition of winning a premiership, albeit they were, because of their pride and their level of competitiveness, they were always going to perform at their best, albeit maybe their best was behind them, but their long-term commitment to drive the footy club and therefore the players around them, particularly the young players. In our first game, we had 17 players who'd never played a game of AFL football before. And, that's unheard of. I don't reckon that'll ever happen again. And so in that context, having your core group of leaders on the ground committed to the long-term future of the footy club, I believe set a fabulous foundation for teaching those young players what it takes to be competitive and a winner in the competition.
Is that lesson still visible in the club today?
I do. I think they left an unbelievable legacy for our footy club, and Gubby Allen and others who made those decisions and collected that group of people together. I mean, many of them have actually moved on and are now working at other footy clubs, but I would be astonished. I'm sure they would have great pride in the contribution they've made to our footy club, and rightfully so.
So you're involved with the Giants, 2009. Then 2017, the women's side is created, and you go over and you become the first person in history to coach both an AFL and an AFLW team, which is a great honour. But I don't want to ask you about that. What I want to ask you about is what that experience, having coached both men and women and youth at the elite level, has sort of taught you about motivating people.
I'm not sure about motivating people, but I think it was a fabulous challenge for me at the end of my career as a coach to, the notion that astonishing to find myself coaching women, having lived in a man's world, and then to be a man in a woman's world, is something I'd recommend everybody experiences at some point, because it actually it allows you to see not just I guess some of the foibles that our game has lived with for a long time, but also what life's like, if you belong to a minority group or a group that's marginalised by society in various ways. And certainly the women's game had been marginalised for a long, long time. And so to be a part of that and to make a small contribution to the growth of the game is a very humbling and some experience, and something I'm really proud of. What did I learn? Flexibility. I learnt that the game is fundamentally the same no matter where you play it or what level you play it at, but tailor-making the program to fit the needs of the people that you're working with. What works in situation A doesn't necessarily work in situation B, and so the ability to be flexible and creative and think differently around that is a great challenge.
We also have talked about that quote, which I first came across from Anson Dorrance, and I think that's where you saw it too, which is, men need to perform to feel like they belong, whereas women need to belong in order to feel like they perform. Do you believe that?
100%. Look, I think that's very true. What I would also say is that over my time coaching in the male space, the men have probably become more and more and more like that as we've broken down the myths of what it is to be a male or a man. I think men are allowed to be much more sensitive beings now than they traditionally have been. So I'd say that, in my view, the male space has transitioned more towards the need for the connection. But I'd also argue that over time, I think as the women become more hardened, if you like, to the professional environment in a football AFL football sense, that the opposite will be true for them. So there's no doubt that's true. The need for the women that I coach to feel valued and worthy and supported certainly was central to growth and change for them.
There's this great documentary that our friend Shauna Keogh put together about Cora Staunton, the Irish athlete that comes across to Australia, and at the age of, I think, 36, she becomes an AFLW player, and you're all through that documentary because you're teaching her. You're teaching someone to learn a new game, and it's a fascinating watch. I'll put the link to the documentary in the show notes. But you've got a teaching background at school, but how did that experience sharpen up your teaching skills?
I think central to learning is an open mindset, and Cora, probably the most driven athlete I coached, male or female, and she had that in abundance, and so that actually made it in lots of ways easy. What I did find is that the more I coached in the early days, the worse I made it. And in the end, I had to throw in ideas and suggestions around her playing with the ball rather than actually, do this, do that, adjust this, hold it this way. I felt that I was better off to say, try and make it do this. Try and make it the ball do that. That said, she still ran around a corner. She broke all the rules, but she found a way to make it work. And it's the fastest player in the AFLW competition to get to 50 goals at an age when everybody else was given the game up long ago. God, I can only imagine what she'd have been like if she'd arrived here as a 20-year-old. She would have been an absolute. Well, for me, she was a superstar anyway. But she'd have been the best player in this competition by the length of the straight had she embraced the game earlier. The other thing is that she had the capacity to. She had a lot of teammates and staff who wanted to support and help her, and she, in the end, unlike some of the other transitioning athletes from other sports that I've worked with, she had the capacity to shut out a lot of the noise and trust her instincts, perhaps better than any of the others, which allowed her to narrow her focus and rather than try and take in too much at once. So, interesting athlete.
Al, the next question's a bit of a difficult one. So I hope you're okay with it. 2021, one of your players, Jacinda Barclay, takes her own life. Now, you haven't spoken about it publicly, something you and I have talked about. I don't want to open old wounds, but I would like to ask you what needs to change so that this doesn't happen again.
The truth is there's no answer to that question, because I don't think in Jacinta's case, if anything changed, it would change the outcome. Unfortunately, mental health is a part of our world, the world we live in, and unfortunately, Jacinta suffered from that illness, or a form of that illness. I think that what I learnt during that phase, and I hear a lot of people say, oh, if only we'd known, and in fact the truth is, in this case, the people who needed to know did, and we weren't able to stop it, prevent it, change it. But what I do know is that for people who are in the depths of despair, there's actually nowhere for them to go. If you have no money, no resources, and the medical system says you don't need to be in hospital anymore, well, where do you go? And in the context of, if your life's in turmoil, the reality is you piss people off, you annoy people, and so you marginalise your support group after a period of time if that's the nature of the illness that you're suffering. So our system really isn't set up to support those people. What else did I learn? When you're looking to try and support people in this situation, there is there is a huge difference in having somebody ring you to ask if they can help and you having to ring them to ask for help. And that is, so I'm talking there more around not the person suffering the illness, but those who are looking to support those who are. And I think that I would encourage anybody, if they're aware of others in these situations, you need to get over yourself and pick up the phone and check in if people are okay, if there's something that you can do to help. What else did I learn? So no matter what else I learned was that no matter what you do, sometimes it's not enough. I learnt that I learnt through my experience with Jacinta that even though you think you know them, sometimes you don't. I learned an awful lot about Jacinta after her death that I didn't know about her before, and I wish I'd known those things. Would it have made any difference? No, but yeah. I wish and I think Jacinta losing her life was a huge waste, because I know that if she'd been a male athlete, she wouldn't have been. For context, this woman was the quarterback in a lingerie league, NFL winning season as a rookie. She was the lead pitcher in the national baseball team, and she was our centre half forward. If she'd played any of those sports at that level in the men's space, she'd have been a rock star and very, very rich. And she was a rock star, particularly if you asked Jacinta, she was a rock star. But the support she had around her at the end and the financial resources she had would have been very different if she'd been a male. And that sits in my guts a bit.
What support was available for you after it happened?
I have a good family. That's probably where it ended.
Okay, so let's move on from that story. And thank you for sharing it. I can see the pain in you.
No, it's not pain. I'm proud of the part I tried to play in Jacinta's life. I'm proud of the relationship I had with her. I'm proud of the fact that she trusted me and she didn't trust too many people. I hold that dear.
I think it's no surprise that in 2022, and I say that because I now know you and I spent time researching for these questions, but in 2022 you were awarded the Neil Danaher Lifetime Achievement Award, which I've got written here is awarded to an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to the game of footy over a lifetime. Now, the other people that have won this award, there's names like Neil Craig, David Weedham, Mark Williams. There's a long list of people who are all legends of the game and very well known. So when people reflect on the contribution you've made, all these people you've touched on this journey, and you're touching more of them these days as well with your work in the AIS, but what is it you hope they use? What words do you hope they use to describe that contribution you've made?
I'd like to think I helped to make their life better, and for some that was probably more in the athletic performance space, and for others it might have been in their, their life away from the game. I know I didn't please everybody all the time. That comes with the job. It's how it is. It's odd because I sit back now and I'm sort of not sure that that's how I feel about my career. Should I have done more? Could I have done more? There aren't many trophies in the cabinet. That pisses me off. So there's an element of a lack of fulfilment, if you like, in some regards, and the cup's pretty full in others.
I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to finish. Al, it's been terrific getting to know you this last year and getting the chance to interview you here in my kitchen today. Thank you for coming in and answering the questions, and wish you all the best chasing down that elusive cup.
Cheers, mate.
Hi everyone, you have been listening to the great coach Alan McConnell. I hope you got a lot out of the insight and wisdom that comes from Alan's long journey in sport and found a few ideas that you can bring back to your own team for discussion. When I listened back, the other key highlights for me were Alan's idea that, quote, there's an element of leadership that I think stems from a self-belief that allows you to look outside of yourself in a way that does allow you to influence others. The wonderful idea that deposits in the care space allow you to challenge people and help them grow and change. And the very personal story he shares about dealing with the tragic passing of one of his players, Jacinda Barclay. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Owen Mooney, who, after listening to our interview with Liam Sheedy, said, another brilliant episode from the @Coaches Great. Thanks, Owen. We love the feedback, the notes, the letters, the correspondence we get from people all over the world. It keeps us going. So please, if you have a few minutes to drop us a note, we'd appreciate it. The energy from our audience keeps us going, and we hope to keep going for a long while yet. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.
Business is booming, but you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think unpaid bills were just part of it. Ugh. But batch payments? Wow. Automated accounts payable? Even better. All in one place. That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No bills in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search XERO for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Security program on spreadsheets, new regulations piling up, and audit dread? It's time for Vanta. Vanta automates security and compliance, brings evidence into one place, and cuts audit prep by 82%. Less manual work, clearer visibility, faster deals, zero chaos. Call it compliance or call it compliance. Get it? Join the 15,000 companies using Vanta to prove trust. Go to vanta.com/com.
Immersing yourself in all things soccer ahead of this summer's World Cup, I'm Alex Abnos, Senior Sports Editor from The Guardian. And whether you're a soccer beginner or you know the game inside and out, we've got you covered. Read, watch, and listen as our journalists connect the dots between the games, the cultures, and this political moment. We'll have daily newsletters throughout the tournament, reporters on the ground with all the big teams, and the legendary Football Weekly podcast. The Guardian, bringing you the whole picture on soccer. Search Guardian Soccer for more.